suppose you've got, by now, an if-then clause, introducing this concept already, if-then clause, and we can translate this totally primitively into worlds of promoters and worlds of the actual gene. Okay, so you've got an if-then clause. Suppose you are dehydrated. If you were dehydrated, translating that into actual biology, I don't know, your hematocrit or how wrinkly your kidneys are getting or some such thing, then tell your kidneys to start doing something or other that kidneys do to retain water, which I once understood for a final but no longer do. But you wake them up and they have some response. So we've got an if-then clause. If you are getting dehydrated, then make your kidneys work in a way that increases water retention. This is ridiculous. There is no, if you're getting dehydrated promoter, there is no gene that is equivalent. There's networks though. There's networks and there's ways in which your kidney monitors that and other outposts in your body. So we have a rough if-then clause. Wouldn't take a whole lot of imagination to turn that into real biology. Now suppose you have some transposable event. Suppose whatever it is, the promoter world of that picks up and moves, and the if you were dehydrated part of the if-then clause floats around, it gets plunked down upstream from the genes that say go and ovulate. What have you just invented? What does this allow you to do? So now you've got an if-then clause, a promoter that responds to dehydration, and it turns on genes related to ovulation. What does that get for you? Any ideas? Oh, come on. Ovulate really frequently. Okay, depends on your threshold. If like you should be skip orange juice in the morning, does that mean you're dehydrated enough to ovulate? Okay, you could set it at a very low threshold like that. You could do that. You could do something else though. What else? Yeah. Okay, you're about to die of dehydration, and that gives you one last chance for a round of passing on copies of your genes. If you could find some guy who isn't dehydrated to a dramatic blood flow extent. Okay, that's a possibility. What else can you do?
Seasonal mating.
Yes, seasonal mating. That's what it's mostly used for. Certainly possibilities here, but what this allows you to, you're a species where 6 months of the year it's dry and 6 months of the year it's wonderful, wet and lush and exactly the time you want to be having a baby, and you've got like a 6-month gestation period. What do you want? You want your body to know when it's the dry season, and that's the signal to mate because you want to give birth during the rainy season. And then there's species where, you know, you are pregnant for 2 weeks or so, and what you want to have there as a rule is, oh my God, if it's the dry season, don't ovulate because I'm going to give birth to kids who are going to starve or some such thing. Let's wait until I get a signal that I'm totally wet and hydrated, then ovulate. You introduce novel if-then clauses, and for certain species, this would be how you would do seasonal mating, how to know you should ovulate at a time of year where, given your gestation length, it's going to set you up for giving birth at the time of year when your offspring are most likely to survive, unless you will have passed on copies of your genes, all of that. So that's great. Another example, and this one's immediately accessible and is a first crude way of beginning to approach some of the stuff that just flowed seamlessly and cheaply in the forms of theories from last week's stuff. Okay, so you have some if-then element in there and a promoter which in some way can tell this individual near me smells like me. And we will see by next week exactly how that translates into genetics. But this individual kind of smells a lot like me, and it has an if-then clause which immediately shuts down transcription of all sorts of things related to fertility and so. You don't mate with relatives. Some sort of incest taboo runs through a gazillion species out there. Individuals smelling like you, if you are a hamster, make you much less likely to mate with them. So a very logical if-then clause. All of that works great. And now you've had a transposable genetic event, and you plunk down the if it smells like me then into upstream of the gene that says cooperate. And what have we just invented? The starts of kin selection. And you could see all sorts of rules like if you have more promoters, you could begin to have subtleties of saying if they really, really smell a lot like me, like if all these promoters are going off at once, then really, really, really cooperate. If they smell only somewhat like me, only somewhat cooperate, you could begin to fine-tune that. What if you just invented a way of taking sensory information about degree of relatedness and turning that into your extent of sacrificing for one sibling or 8 cousins? So you could begin to see how you invent new if-then clauses. Obviously, this is ridiculous. Obviously, this bears no relationship to what's going on in the real world. This would be happening in nose cells. This is occurring down in the ovaries. There is no promoter that responds to, ooh, somebody here is smelling like me. But there's some that do stuff not all that far from that. You could begin to imagine turning this into real biology, how you could program for this. And once you got genes moving around, you've plunked a promoter down someplace else. You've just made a new if-then clause.